I'd like to call this February 9th, 2023 Board of Education work session to order. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Cobain?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here.
Ms. Stochek?
Here.
Mrs. Hausen?
Here. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is our district goals. They remain the same: academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And next we have public comment. We do have one public comment slip. Bonnie.
Tennis.
Thank you.
Like the game?
Tennis. Thank you. If you want to tell us your name and address.
Yeah. My name is Bonnie Tennis, and I live on 9407 Brushwood Lane. Well, I would like to make a few comments about the, I looked at the administrative leadership and teacher contract, and since it's time for renewal, and I thought I'd make a few comments. One of them is the VPG. I looked into VPG, and should not be phased out, but should be eliminated. District is still paying over $200,000 a year for VPG. The exact number from 2020 is $229,000. Last levy increased by $500 per $250,000 home. So if you take the VPG amount and divide by 500, you get 458 homes supporting just this case. When you take that amount and calculate based on the salary increase, since 2013, district paid over $2 million since 2013. And our original number for VPG was over 236. Now it's 66 left. And it's still a substantial amount that the district is paying. And some of them are getting paid like $800, $900 a month for that. That's $8,000 like a year or more. Now, I understand people should get paid for the work they do that year, but taking courses or volunteering years ago should not entitle people to collect for that year and after year for the rest of their teaching years. Some collect, like I said, $800 to $900 a month. It's like a coach assignment. Coach gets paid every year for the work she does or he does. Does not get paid year after year for the work he or she did the previous year. Now, the VPG money could be put for better use, like dental and vision insurance for teachers, which they don't have. It's almost like the homestead exemption. Homestead exemption was not eliminated, was grandfathered, and that is wrong. People that fall just a little bit above the criteria, they don't get it, but I ran through data, and people that make millions or living in $1 million homes, they get homestead exemptions. That's not fair. So this is something that should be eliminated a long time ago. I don't believe that it should be continued, because that's $229,000 a year that could be used for dental and could be used for the glasses. It's not very expensive to get the glasses, and I don't know why the vision and the dental was eliminated for teachers, where administrator and leadership still has that. Now, another thing is the attendance. I've noticed that the attendance incentives was added to the leadership and administrative book. I believe that should be also eliminated. It's not right. I mean, right now, these are people that are not well-do people and well-paid people, and yet they're getting incentive for something that people should be showing up for work, because that's the responsibility. And quite frankly, teachers and administrators do get paid a good amount of salary and should not be looking for that incentive. That incentive we paid, I mean, the school district paid over $46,000. I'm not talking about the employees, I'm talking about teachers. $46,000 a year. That's, again, year after year. And that also could be put for better use. And based on that, whatever the Ohio Department of Education, it's actually not helping at all. I mean, teachers still missing days. And based on the last data, it's like went from 2017, the attendance went from 95 is now as low as 93%. If students will miss days like teachers miss, then they are, they're not even getting paid for attending the school, and yet teachers are getting paid, and they're still missing all those days. And they're getting paid for, and the fact is that it's very unfair because it's per quarter. So teacher can miss, in 1 quarter 15 days and 3 quarters, which is 2 months. A quarter is considered 2 months. So teacher could miss, 3 quarters, could miss in 1 quarter the whole thing and still get $600, which is not right. Now, it's different for the whole year, but this is per quarter. And administrative added 1 more quarter to administration. Now, administration people are well-paid people. Why do they need incentive for attendance? Again, that could be used for that dental or that vision or something else that could be used for. I'm not saying to take it away and give it away because it's already there, but it could be distributed a little bit different way. So, again, I ran through the Ohio Department of Education, and again, in 2022, the last one, it's 300 out of 340 teachers, 3,874 days was missed. That's total cost based on the income that is reported at $1.7 million. Again, that's like having 21 teachers missing in 1 day. That's a substitute. That's 93% of the, so if you look into it, that's what you see. And this attendance should be eliminated. I believe it should be put into different use, and it should not be even considered for administrative or leadership. Another thing is the salary schedule. What I've noticed that administrative and leadership salaries are getting a little bit more, how we say, there's a little bit more, I don't know the word, I knew the word, I forgot about that it's getting, the gap is getting a little bit bigger. It's not recorded in the book, the administrative book, but for 23 years, the year number, 23, the administrative got raises and leadership only got 2% raises. It's, give you an example, business manager operations got the base 14%, assistant superintendent over 10%, 7%, you see 8%, but yet leadership only has got 2%. So the gap is getting bigger again there. So what I've noticed that teachers' salaries are going up. The administrative, the teachers getting catch up with the administrative, but the leadership is it's going to be even lower than the teachers. And everybody's saying, oh, leadership, they want kids to be leaders, future leaders. Well, I would say I don't want to be a leader in Strongsville because the leader makes less money, less than a teacher with the same amount of experience than the administrator. So that's something to look at into. It should be kind of, and it's not mentioned that leadership was mentioned 2%, but it was not mentioned that the base was increased for the administration a lot higher than for leadership. Another
Bonnie,
thing
I'm
is
sorry,
that-
I don't want to cut you off, but we're trying to keep public comment to 3 minutes.
Yeah, just one more thing about the severance pay again, which is the number of days, 435 days. Now, because increasing again, the income is increasing, that is really causing, I would say in the future will cause a problem for future teachers because it is going to be consuming a lot of money for retirement and for those sick days where next teacher generation will have a problem with the retirement. Teachers are already in Columbus stating that districts should put more money into the contributions. Right now, the district contributes 14%. They want even more percent because they said that teachers increased, but the districts did not increase that amount. And again, I don't understand why the teachers that was eliminated, but yet administrative still gets paid. Still gets picked up, but the teachers got not picked up. Now it was added to base amount, but I don't think that was fair because some teachers got the lower teachers, the top teachers got 10%, 10.3%, but the lower ones, which are for this, were available for step levels for educational increases. Some of them got 20%, and it's again not fair. Those catching up with the top teachers, and it's not fair that teacher with 15-year experience makes almost the same money as the teacher that makes with 30-year experience. So that's what I've noticed, and there is that discrepancy, and I think we should all work on that.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, next on the agenda, George, Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Hausum. I have one item for your consideration tonight, and it's an after-the-fact purchase order. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code for after-the-fact invoices, the board approves the following invoice for payment, and the treasurer be authorized to sign the fiscal certificate. The vendor is Point Spring and Drive Shaft Company for bus supplies and parts. The purchase order was dated February 1st, 2023 for $3,752.25, and it was purchased on December 19th, 2022. This was originally purchased against a blanket purchase order, which put it over its threshold of $25,000. So because of that, it needed to generate a new purchase order, which over $3,000 requires Board of Education approval for after the fact. So since we don't have any other items for approval, this is an individual vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Kilbane, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Any questions for George? All right, George, take the roll.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
Ms. Stavcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum.
Yes. The motion carries. Next, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ryba.
Thank you, Ms. Hausum. What we're going to start with tonight is a discussion on our Allen property. So as I talk a little bit, I'm going to ask Eric and Betsy to come up to the podium. They are leaders of our Strongsville Youth Lacrosse Association. So as we know, Allen used to have an elementary school on it. A while ago, that elementary school was taken down. And then we leased that property. Some of our properties we leased to different groups to be a community support. So we leased that property to the city of Strongsville to be used for rec fields for soccer for a number of years. They took care of the property. They cut the grass. But over the years, the rec department didn't have a great need for that property. And Strongsville Youth Lacrosse was looking for a place to call home. We were leasing part of the Albion property to them to use as a field. So we met with the city and the Youth Lacrosse, and the city said, hey, we're good. And so probably about a year ago or so, we ended the lease with the city and continued the lease on that property with the Lacrosse Association. And basically for us it's a dollar fee a year that they use it and they maintain the property, cut the grass. And so during that time, as a part of the stipulation of our lease, is that if you want to make any improvements to the property, that needs to get approval first. So Betsy and Eric are here. They met with Rich and I a few months ago and shared some of their thoughts. We thought it would be great for you to see it, so I'm going to turn it over to the both of them to share what they are envisioning for the Allen property and how Lacrosse can use it moving forward.
Thank you. Hi, members of the board. I'm Eric Wall. I have 3 boys in Strongsville school systems, and they all have played lacrosse, and the sport is a big deal in our family. And this is Betsy Drensky.
2 girls playing lacrosse for a long time. My husband helps coach. It's kind of what our family does now. So we're super involved in the youth program, and our kids are in high school now, but it's important to us that we able to continue this program and have a space for them to be, because we've been scrounging around the city for a number of years now to have a place to play and practice. So we came across this, and we've been working with Dr. Ryba for a while now. We've talked about this for a couple of years now, and what we could do to find a space that lacrosse could call home and then still improve the space for the community. So
Yeah, so our program is, believe it or not, it's 15, George, I messed this up already.
Did you get it?
Okay, I got it. We're 15 years old, and we are largely the feeder program for the high school. Let me not mess this up again. So this is some of our fast facts. We serve about 300 families a year, and over our 15 years, probably 1,500 families have been touched by our program, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it seems like a lot to us who continue to grow. It's actually America's fastest growing sport is lacrosse. It's kind of an exciting thing. But when you're small, I guess you have big numbers, you grow a lot. But it's kind of caught off on the East Coast, and it's really spread this way. And Betsy and I actually are both members on our league level now and really trying to foster this into the communities and help it. But inside of Northeast Ohio, Strongsville has a really good story behind lacrosse. We're probably one of the largest programs for boys and girls in the Northeast Ohio area. So we're pretty excited about that. We have a number of coaches. A lot of them are coaches, they're certified. Our biggest challenge operationally since we've taken over is really the scarcity of fields in Strongsville. It's difficult to find places for kids to play. And previous relationships that we've had with other organizations, like the Catan Corporation, where we used to practice, as ownership changes hands and things happen in the community, we've been displaced from those places, and it sent us on this hunt to find new places to have our kids practice. And Dr. Iberts helped us because we were able to expand last year into Allen and assume that property. And so we started practicing over there, and we were very grateful to have that as kind of relief for us. And as we're looking around, we would love to make that space a more permanent fixture and upgrade it. So today, when the Allen School was torn down, there's rubble underneath, and there's places where we can't play. There's divots and lower places, what you'd find in a place that's not developed for fields, right? So we do the best we can, and we're there with some soccer kids and some other folks. But now we're in a place where we feel like we're ready to take the next step, and we'd like to put more into it and level out those fields, make them a bit more permanent so that everyone can enjoy it and make it safe for all the little kids running around. And we've come up with this plan. So I think this was socialized with you guys before, so I don't want to hit everything, and I'm mindful of the time. I do know that Strongsville and lacrosse community has a pretty strong relationship going back and forth. Believe it or not, when this sport was early in its adoption, I think Strongsville Lacrosse has contributed about $90,000 to helping make sure that this sport got launched at the high school and through the lean years of making it the transition from a club sport for those high school players into how we know it today. It's part of the Ohio High School Athletic Association, full members, all that jazz that comes with it. But that's kind of a big lift, and we were a part of that. On the receiving end, we have gotten the privilege of these fantastic lease agreements for $1, and then we mow the grass and that jazz. So the property we're talking about, it's Allen. There's a little Mustang right there. It's nestled kind of in Hunting Meadows. The school itself, I think, was raised in 2018. It's about 15 acres. Like I said, there's highland up here, some valleys down here, but there's some playable stuff, but we'd like to improve that. And so I included in here the things that we're looking to improve. I don't know if we have time to go over the pictures. I hope you guys saw those.
You're okay, you can show.
But we're looking to do 3 fields. No night games, not overly commercializing it. It's really just kind of bringing it up to snuff, if you will. So 3 fields. One of them, the first field, what we'd like to do is kind of bifurcated so that we can do it both little kids, 2 games at the same time, or one full field for 5th grade and older. An equipment shed. So today that lives behind where Pat Catan's headquarters used to be. We'd like to repatriate that, move it over into the Allen community to keep all of our stuff together, and so that things aren't unsightly and things get protected from damage and stuff like that. So it's nothing crazy. It's goals. It's things that we just have to winterize and store somewhere. Parking lot restoration. That's just adding more parking spots, basically, and improving what's there already. A community pavilion. So adding something that it's beyond just lacrosse, but anyone could use it. Come there and hang out and have picnics and things like that, another space for that kind of activities. And then a practice wall. We're pretty excited about this. This in particular, it's not only a fundraising aspect where we're wanting to put bricks and logos of community members who are helping us out, but it's actually functional. So the other side of this wall is where folks can hit their balls against it. I know that sounds crazy, but that is, like, you have to do a lot of that in lacrosse. And this helps provide a place and outlet for do it today. So today it happens sporadically. It'll happen like on the side of Kinsner or the side of, pick your school, right? And results vary, and we're kind of all over the community. But having a place that's centralized, not only for the youth program, but for the high school program too, who's also excited, would be really cool for a lot of different people. So let's see, I will show a few. So this shows kind of the walkways. There's a field hidden here. So beyond creating fields, we'd like to add some decorative stuff so that the space we want it to be nice and a tribute to the community, something that we all can be proud of and still looks like nature. here's that wall, but it's probably unlike any wall you had in your in your visions. It's not a monstrosity. It's something that's tastefully done that the community hopefully wouldn't object to. But we also have some FAQs that we're going to socialize with the neighbors, assuming we go forward, to see kind of what their input would be. Here's a picture of the parking spots, the gazebo community area, some picnic facilities, more fields. Here's another field. Lots of fields. I mean, it's fields, right? So when we're talking about building this out, we talked with Dr. Ryba about actually doing a phase gate approach to it and being really responsible. And what we mean by responsible build out is that we'd raise the money for each stage gate and then go ahead and start building afterwards, so that we're not committing or overcommitting to things that we can't finish, or not accounting for downturns in the economy, or you name it, interest things change, and we wouldn't be able to be flexible. So having these stage gates and doing it as a phased approach, I think will be really helpful and kind of de-risks it from a school's perspective. We've started looking at fundraising, but haven't really committed yet in earnest. There's a dinner event that maybe you've heard about that we're trying to raise money through that event. There's volunteers and donations that we're trying to get, in-kind service, and trying to get reductions in what things might cost. Corporate sponsorships would be that wall and perhaps naming rights for different things. But that's pretty much the gist of it. So where am I going? What's the ask of the board? Well, like Dr. Ryba was saying, that today, most leases, I understand, are 1 year. And to get the kind of sponsorship and the kind of investment that we'd like to get from the community, we really need to give them more certainty than that. And so we would like to get special dispensation on a lease agreement to extend it out. And here we put 15 years. We feel super comfortable with that. You guys may not. But that some number more than one to help our investment community know that there's some sort of assuredness that the monies and the efforts and the folks volunteering know that something's going to have staying power. And then once that lease expires, having the first right of refusal to go ahead and renew it if it makes sense for the school district at that time. And then permission to go forward with our phase 1 investment process. And then number 4, to work with Dr. Ryba to really spec out what would those sponsorships and naming opportunities look like, and make sure that they're aligned with things that the school will be comfortable with. So that's kind of the gist. That is a whirlwind tour, but
That was quick.
yeah. Did you have any questions?
The pictures are amazing. My family is runners, so we run through that area
Okay.
quite often. So to see the pictures, it's just amazing. Do you have any plans of security, just because it is a little bit off the beaten path?
We haven't honestly thought about that.
Okay.
I was looking through articles. We did a lot of research on Allen School, and there was concerns when the school was closed but not yet taken down that there would be vandalism and things like that in the community. And it looked like it hadn't happened, like there wasn't a lot of stuff. But recently I did notice, because I've been on that field, that somebody went through and turfed it, drove their cars on it crazily, and created these huge ruts. There's no security cameras there today. But we're hoping that wall could help prevent some of that, at least direct access to some of those fields. I don't think we could cover the entire thing with a wall. That it probably wouldn't be practical.
Right.
Around the parking area, at least, where you can get up there. But we haven't thought about security beyond that. Can I ask you more?
It was just one of my first thoughts, just because it is surrounded by the woods.
Right.
And if you do have a pavilion there and the nice wall, I would just hate to see something happen.
Same.
And
Definitely a risk in any park setting. I'm in charge of parks in another city, and that's a constant concern
Right.
and an issue for me, and it's something I deal with every day. So it would be a risk that we would be taking, that, the pavilion would have, it would be open, and we want it to be park-like so that anybody
Right.
could have access to it. So that is definitely a risk. I don't know if that's further down the line when our fundraising, we could get some type of Wi-Fi.
like I said, I was just curious, yeah.
Yeah. But lights are, I guess, a pretty deterrent, but one of the things we wrote in our FAQs is that we weren't pursuing lights
Right.
because neighbors, frankly, don't like lights, I don't think. I wouldn't like it. Maybe some neighbors would. Maybe it would give them comfort to have light to see what's going in the back there, but that's a challenge I hadn't considered.
Yeah. Like I said, that was one of my thoughts. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
Do you think the neighborhood would be on board with this? You know, sometimes people get, I mean, I'm sure any given game or, you know, you're going to get a lot of traffic. And I think, is there a road just in and out of there? Or is there another, I haven't been there in
Just the
years.
one road in
It's
and
like,
out.
yeah, Park Lane Drive, that ends into that,
Yeah.
that particular space. We have an FAQ that we kind of want to get kind of a nod from you folks first, but we wanted to give QR codes in a flyer to the neighborhood that points back to the FAQ. And we'll include things like security or other questions you come up with to really kind of pull that, the neighbors that live immediately there.
So we talked about potentially marking the neighborhood with doors, giving out those QR codes. I spoke with some of the councilmen the other weekend, and I said I would be offered to host a meeting for, you know, a city open
Right.
meeting to take questions from people, or open house of sorts to answer things. So we're willing to do all that
Yeah.
to make sure they're comfortable. We want to be a good neighbor and improve
Right.
the space that is in their neighborhood. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they start getting upset, does it come back on Strongsville? Does it, I mean, who would they start complaining to?
Everyone, all of the above.
The reality is probably everyone.
I
We
mean,
did,
I think it's beautiful, and I think
Yeah.
it looks great. I'm just saying, like, if you're the person on that street, you don't want to get to the point where, you know, probably a good thing is to have a meeting
Yes.
and see where the
if
people
we're not
are
looking to
at.
run big tournaments, we're looking to have practices. So your weekday 5 to 8 p.m. in the spring, in the
Six-
summer.
60 to 100 kids is what we're
Yeah,
thinking is
so
like
you're not-
We're not
capacity.
putting, it's not a space that we would put tournaments on or have, you know, people parked up all over the place like you see.
It's
in
not like
some-
volunteer park. or anything.
No, that gets a bit muddy, yeah.
When we get that full, we'll need another space.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I shared when we met, you know, the feedback that we receive on the Allen property. So it is our property, it is our responsibility to be a good neighbor and ensure that, you know, we're in support of whoever we're leasing it to. But the concerns that we get are really twofold. It's about walkability and sidewalks and that piece of it. So as we talked about, you know, that's something that I think if we do have a few sidewalks on that property, if the plan would be to completely eliminate those, which it's not, but I think you've got an FAQ there about how that would be addressed. And then it's all tree lined around there, so it's about tree management. When you say, Steve, those are the two biggest things that we would have to take a look at. And the third thing that we talked about is based on the field location and the directionality of the fields, they may need to look at some netting because lacrosse balls go awful fast, and you know, ensuring that they don't go into people's properties would be key. So,
Yeah, because it's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
don't, I'm just thinking, you know, long term, because if you get in somewhere and then all you do is have complaints, you guys will go crazy too.
Sure.
Right,
So,
We don't want that.
no.
right.
I'd like to give Cameron direction to move forward. I wanted to thank you guys. When we met earlier last year and now, in my opinion, I wish all our groups were as prepared as you guys are.
That's fine.
Were as thoughtful as you guys are. As far as being good neighbors, I mean, I don't know any homeowner who wouldn't want a neighbor that's worried about everything that they would be worried about. And at the end of the day, you know, you're all family people. You're going to have, you would have the same concerns, right? So, you know, kudos to you guys for doing it so well. Let us know how we can be good partners, but I have April 1st at Mashaw's. I wrote that down. I'll be there. Let us know how we can support, assuming we have the direction of the will of the board. Let's get this done.
I have one concern.
Mhm.
Not that I'm not supportive, because I am, and I echo all the things that Richard said. However, we do have a presentation coming immediately following you that's from the Facilities Committee, and I'm very hesitant to make any decision for 15 years before I hear what they have to say. So if we could just hold temporarily.
We'll hold it for an hour.
Temporarily, and let's hear from them and see how these two pieces work together, and then
Very good. Thank you for your time. Our contact info, I think, is on that presentation, so we're happy to calls, emails, whatever, come meet with anyone who wants to talk more about it.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Eric, for the time and energy and work you put into that and working to enhance things for our community and also a property of our school district, so appreciate that. Next up, we do have a presentation, as Michelle shared, from our Board Facilities Development Committee. Mike Caldwell is coming up to represent the committee, and as you can see, at least we can see in the audience, we've got almost the majority of our Facilities Development Committee here tonight. And Steve Bruckner, Operations Manager, is going to provide some assistance. So as we know, and you guys have been announcing, they've been doing a lot of work, a lot of touring our buildings, focusing on our elementary facilities. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you to share what you've learned and where the Facility Development Committee is recommending we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ryba, and thank you, Board, for your time this evening. My name is Mike Caldwell. I'm representing the Facilities Development Committee, and as Dr. Ryba mentioned, thank you to the committee members and leaders who are here tonight in support of this. So first off, I just wanted to reiterate the mission of the board and the objectives that we have. So first off, this is a committee that evolved from a task force that was first formed in 2014. The Facilities Development Committee was organized by former board members to continue the ongoing planning and management of the physical facilities of this Strongsville City School District. The committee meetings are open to the public, and this committee reports back to you as the board. The links to the committee meeting minutes and all of the data that we'll be representing tonight are available through the district website. You can also check the district website as well for our meeting schedule, which will be evolving as we go forward. So please check that for the most up-to-date information. So the objectives that we've been working on most recently, previously this committee reviewed the use of funds related to the bond issue that was passed in 2012 for the new middle school and the high school renovations. And as those responsibilities have changed and evolved, the committee has begun to focus on these established objectives. The group has been meeting monthly with the following objectives: provide recommendations to the board based on enrollment trends and school facility requirements, implementing the 30-year facilities plan, and providing a biannual review to the board, maintaining and reviewing an inventory of all district properties, reviewing the permanent improvement fund capital budget, and overseeing any assets that have specific requirements to be eligible for future funding. So this slide speaks to the scope of the facilities that we've been reviewing as a committee. You see the 5 elementary buildings at the beginning, followed by the administration building, the preschool building, middle school, high school, the sports services, including the bus garage, Catan Stadium, and also the vacant properties that are under the management and maintenance of the district. So approximately 1 year ago, the Facilities Development Committee began to focus on the state of our elementary buildings. The group recognizes that there are other needs within the district, but our focus was on the elementary buildings. Beginning with the school board authorizing an enrollment study and subdivision analysis with cooperative strategies in May of 2022. And to quickly summarize this study, we'll have some additional slides with details, but enrollment is predicted to increase over the next 10 years. At a moderate rate of increase, the total approximate enrollment in the district will go from 5,600 students to 6,800 students, an increase of 1,300 students. Next, the committee held educational visioning presentations and recommended GPD Group as a partner to the board to begin detailed analysis of all of our district facilities. GPD did a full evaluation of all of the elementary schools in the summer of 2022. The committee has since toured all of the elementary buildings and the administration building. In addition, the committee has reviewed capital improvement needs of the district, immediate emergency needs, and reviewed all of the vacant school properties. And GPD made a presentation to us in September and the board regarding the state of our elementary buildings. And so next I want to hand off to Mr. Bruckner, our operations manager. He'll walk through the next slides that are specific to the details of the assessment and analysis from GPD Group.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. So for the visual learners and in the audience here and at home, so this summarizes what Mike was talking about. So you have the aggressive population increase, you have the moderate, which is the middle line, then you have a low. What we learned from cooperative strategies is that from those three tracks, that the one that they recommended that we look at and form some of our future, or base some of our future decisions on, would be the moderate, which is what Mike said is still a 1,300 student increase over the next 10 years. So now that we answered the question of are we growing, are we shrinking as a district, we looked at our current buildings to say, okay, with the influx that we are predicted to have, even at a moderate level, can we sustain with the current buildings? And I don't mean, this doesn't mean anything as far as educational programming. This has nothing to do with technology. This just literally is, do we have enough rooms to fit all these bodies? You can see in the chart there, while we looked at the 10-year spread, the max classrooms needed at Chapman versus available is lower by 2. So we said Chapman could accommodate. Now this also assumes that we are putting the encore subjects on carts. Kinsner is not able to accommodate when the classrooms needed exceeds the space available. Obviously, we're not able to accommodate that. Muraski's in the same spot with not able to accommodate. Sarar is able to accommodate by 1 classroom, and Whitney is unable to accommodate. So 3 of our 5 elementaries on its face are not able to accommodate. However, I would, as we looked and we delved further into the numbers, including putting those other encore classrooms on a cart, that's not preferable. So this is at best what we're able to do with having those accommodations that are not what we would want. All right. The 2/3 guideline for the Facilities Construction Commission is in a nutshell, when they review the building, if it's at a 66% or 2/3, then they recommend go ahead and rebuild. At that point, over 66%, the amount that the district would spend to bring everything up to code, the amount that the district would spend to ensure that the facilities, both above ground and underground, are functioning at the level that they need to, it is just, quite frankly, not worth it in the eyes of the Ohio Facilities Commission. Once that 66% is that target number. So we went through with our partner GPD, and they did an evaluation. So you can see all of the elementary schools. The number in parentheses is how old that school is. So you can see we've gotten some life out of our schools. 50, 60 years of life out of the schools is good. And as you've heard me say in many meetings, we're doing a great job of keeping up with them. But the time has come to look at those 50-plus old buildings and say, how much further do we go with these buildings as they are, knowing that there's some serious renovations or that are going to need to be done to make them sustainable in the next 10 years. Chapman is at 73%, so the recommendation is new construction. Kinsner, which is the youngest building that we've had, is 24 years old, is at a 33%, and that is renovate the existing. There are some issues that are at present at Kinsner where we would have to invest some money, but nothing to totally move to another location or anything like that. That is nowhere near the recommendation because that number is nowhere near that 66% target rate. Muraski, it does say 63% on there, and that is the average because we do have a newer section there. But our representatives at GPD, there is a tool that OFCC uses, and they could separate the building out. With the average being 63, it is not any great leap of faith. It is a logical step to say that the old section, which is 66 years old, would be well above the 66% if the average itself is 63. Sarar is at 74% and Whitney's at 81%. So you can see with the exception of the new section at Muraski and at Kinsner. The recommendation from the OFCC's 2/3 rule would be to go ahead and replace those buildings.
And Steve, just to add context, although it's not on the slide, they did the same assessment of this building since it's a former elementary, and it also is above that 66%.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
All right, I'll hand it back over to Mike.
Thank you. So as Mr. Breckner walked us through the results, as we compiled this information, the committee, again, was tasked with determining a decision point. Do we renovate? Do we recommend replacement? And our formal recommendation, as you see here, is to pursue replacement for Chapman, Sarrar, and the Whitney Elementary buildings, along with the original portion of the Muraski Elementary building. We recommend renovation of Kinsner Elementary and consider improvements for other district administration buildings, the preschool, and other facility needs. So the summary of these findings is that these buildings no longer meet the needs of the district students, especially those that we're recommending for replacement. And again, with the knowledge and financial comparison using the 2/3 rule from the OFCC, the committee determined that this is cost prohibitive. It would be cost prohibitive to renovate the buildings, and we recommend, as we've discussed here. So the committee recommends this unanimously. This was a unanimous decision by the committee to pursue this, and further recommend that the board consider the admin building as well as upcoming needs for preschool services moving forward. While we have the data that supports this recommendation, it is important to note that the Facilities Development Committee does not have all of the data yet to say what should be built or where or when. We feel that we have laid the foundation for the district and the board to move forward with the task of beginning this next phase of study. So the last slide we have here is, again, just restating a few of the factors that weighed into our recommendation. Again, as Mr. Breckner mentioned, and the assessment showed, the aging buildings are no longer a cost-efficient option for us to maintain, and that's one of our objectives as a committee, to make sure that we're doing this financially in a prudent way, as well as a district goal as well. The lack of physical space, as the space utilization showed, to meet our future projected enrollment, difficulty in providing suitable accommodations for students from an educational, curricular, and support services. And this was really driven home when we did our tour of the buildings and seeing just the state that they were in. And many of these buildings would no longer pass code by the state. If we were even to attempt to try to renovate, the bar would be really high to meet those standards. Again, you can imagine over 50, 60 years, the ability for these buildings to adapt to the change in the educational needs as well as technology. And it's difficult to provide those modern technology capabilities in support of our academic programs. As I mentioned, they no longer meet the building codes, and as we go, there's always the potential that it could impact student safety. So thank you for your time for us to represent our findings and the work that's been done by the committee. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for their support and their time and effort and commitment to this initiative. I'd like to hand back to Dr. Ryba to discuss next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Before I kind of share my thoughts, I just want to share my appreciation to you and Kristen and Kevin for your leadership of the group and the entire team. It's been a busy fall for everybody going through the buildings, and the thoughtful and on-point recommendations from your assessment are greatly appreciated. I just want to reiterate this committee is all community members. We are there as staff, as support personnel. So again, I think that's an important part, that key folks from our community are seeing our buildings and saying, hey, for the future needs of our kids and the educational needs and the space needs, we have to look at updating our facilities. So Ms. Hausen, before I kind of share my comments, I want to turn over to you to see if there's any comments or questions from the board while Mike and Steve are up there.
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. Who wants to go first? Questions or comments?
Hey, Mike, I'll start the ball rolling. First of all, thank you to the committee members. Though some of the committee members were on the committee back when we did the middle school and high school renovation, so it's nice to see that consistency. It's also nice to see new faces and new perspectives, and I like the balance that the committee has. I was reading in the paper, there was a letter to the editor a couple of weeks ago that challenged us, took us to task, said that, we just, there's just a plan, so we did the survey to just push our plan. I just wanted to ask, do you guys feel that you're independent and that your recommendations are your independent recommendations?
Yes, so I think it's a good question. I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for the board, or on behalf of the committee, that this was independent thought. We put a lot of time and effort into this. As I mentioned, we toured the buildings, and just seeing that firsthand, you don't need a survey or anything to kind of justify it. Seeing it firsthand really drives it home. And I think, as we go forward, we'll have a communication plan that we'll be working through. I don't want to steal some of your thunder as well for some of the next steps, but I think as part of that, we'll make it very clear that this is an important need for the district.
And I like analogies. It's going to come up to be like a car. Why don't we just get new tires, new brakes, and save a lot of money?
Because the axles are falling apart.
Is there more?
No, the engine's about
We'll
ready
save
to
some.
blow and your head gasket's leaking. The reality of it is, could we renovate these and make them look better? Sure. But that new roof is still going to be sitting on 60-year-old walls. Those walls are still sitting on a 60-year-old sewer system that we're very lucky at Whitney. It didn't supercharge the whole building and draw sewage all into all the classrooms. That's the reality. If it was just the brakes and the pads, to use your analogy, this would have been shown. The OFCC is also not going to take our recommendation. They give their own. GPD is a partner with us, but we have all the documentation to say that the OFCC went through and they looked at all of our mechanical systems. They looked at all of our architectural issues in these buildings, and it came back with, you need to replace because you're going to be hemorrhaging money if you start to just renovate.
Is it fair to say Kinsner and the new part of Muraski would be the example of the car where we're going to put the new tires and the brakes on and
Yes.
save a lot of money?
Yes.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Comments or questions?
All right, so thank you, Mike, thank you, Steve, and to the committee again. So with that recommendation from the Facilities Development Committee, we need to start planning next steps. And where do we go from here to look away from the big picture of, hey, we've got to do something with our elementary buildings outside of the new portion of Muraski and Kinsner, and let's get specific. So this is a community project. Our schools are to serve the needs of our community. So the next phase of this is to engage community partners in this work. And so, as we've been doing these assessments, we've been kind of pre-planning in anticipation of whatever the recommendation was, but we wanted to get some insights on what our elementary facility needs are moving forward. So we reached out to our parents and community members and said, hey, if you're interested, be a part of a group to study this, to provide your expertise and insight. And so we had a little over 100 people respond. And so we are going to have, we sent out invites earlier this week. We are going to have 50-plus people on a committee. The other 50 people we're going to call key communicators. So they may be involved depending on their expertise, but we will send specific communications to them to keep them in the loop, opportunities for feedback. They can kind of crowd surf ideas to their friends and families so that we can truly see what do we want in Strongsville City Schools in terms of our elementary schools moving forward. I want to be clear, this next phase of our process is not about designing elementary schools. It's about, we talked about enrollment, right? We've got increasing enrollment that's happening and projected to continue to happen. We've got different properties across the district, as we've said. It's going to be taking a look at what kind of structure of elementary schools do we want? How many do we want? Do we want them to be neighborhood schools or community schools like they are now? Do we want them to be grade-banded schools? Whatever the idea may be, it's an open blank sheet of paper right now. So we are going to engage with our community and get that feedback and have a variety of talking points to look at what we want to do moving forward. And as Mike shared in his presentation and recommendation, and I think that's a good lead-in for the committee's work too. Although our main focus is elementary schools, there's other things that we have to discuss as well. We talked about this building, the preschool, some of our properties that we have, and what's going to be the future of those, or other facility needs that may arise as we go forward. So that is the next steps that will start here by the end of the month to engage this community and set a plan of action into place to answer some of those questions, with the end result being a plan to propose to the community for the future of our elementary facilities and whatever other properties or facilities are taken on in this work. All of this culminates in community support for a future bond project. A bond project, as Mike shared, in 2012, the community supported a bond project that built our middle school, renovated our high school and preschool and transportation complex, and we use those funds to do a lot of other things, safety enhancements, tennis courts, paving, and a lot of other things around the district. So what we have to consider, and the board has to start reflecting on, is what is the timeline for which we feel that we would want to go to the community, share with them based on all of this stakeholder input and feedback. Here is the plan for the future of our elementary and other facilities moving forward. I am proposing that we would look at putting a bond on the ballot in May of 2024. That would give us the time necessary to do this in a thoughtful way, to take a look at doing an adequate study, a significant study in terms of all of these aspects of the project in coordination with some of the properties we have and other facilities, to look at this topic in depth. And then we have a lot of timelines that we have to follow, right? So it's not, if we say we want to go for a bond project in May of 2024, that means months before that, the board has to make an official decision. A few months before that, we have to have official presentations as to what that's going to look like. So there is a lot of lead time that we need going into that. So that's kind of a preview of what I'm recommending as next steps. Wanted to put that out there and share that with the board and see if there's any initial feedback or comments or thoughts you have at this time.
I know I've thought a lot about the November versus the May, and I think one of the things is that you said, or the committee said, is that it doesn't change when we open doors on the new buildings. If we pass this November, we pass in May, the buildings will still open in 2027. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that, to me, that makes a big difference. At 9 months as opposed to 15 months, we need to take the time and do it right. One of the planning points was allows for the planning committee to fully explore, vet, and educate on all topics related to this project if we wait till May. So to me, I like the idea of waiting until May, but I don't want to speak for everybody else.
I agree. Can I ask, do we have a plan in the interim? I know we've talked about this, but, 2027 seems like a long time away. And we've all been in the building. So I'm just wondering, I know we've talked a little bit, but maybe we need to talk more until these things, this all is great, but there's going to be kids here for 4 more years.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ms. Covey. So if we look at that May 2024 and the community supports that, the buildings would be open in 27. So what do we do in the interim, right? So Steve and I are working hand in hand. We're working a few different pathways in terms of how do we're not going to do anything different with the building, but how can we alleviate some of the space constraints that we have? Right. So we have a couple pathways that we are working through at this point. We've got the target by the end of the month. He's got a project, I've got a project that we're going to work on. And then at that time, we can share specifics with the board about what those options are. And that could give us as early as next school year, opportunities to alleviate some of the space constraints that we have at the buildings.
So I'm supportive of the plan. I look at it as we have two things to do. The first thing we have to do is, what do we want to build? And I know I have my opinions. I know everybody has their opinions, but I like that we have a method and a plan to determine what the community ultimately wants and will support. So first we have to say, what do we want to build? How do we want that to look, et cetera, and present that to the community. And then the second phase of it is earning the community's trust, that if they invest in the district for this project, we will continue the values we've used for all of our other projects. We'll do it well. We won't waste money. We'll think about making sure that we're building something today that will last 30, 40, 50 years. And, you know, all bets are off, but, you know, for example, we had open classrooms once, and then we had to come back and put dividers in. We need to be able to go to the community and say, we're not going to do those kinds of things. We're going to do it right and well the first time, and respect that if they entrust the taxpayers' money to us. We're not just going to say it's other people's money. It's all of our money. That's my soapbox.
Cameron, as we were doing some discussion earlier, I remember there was, if we were going to do November 23, we started to have to like vote on things by like May. Do you remember those, like, can you outline those filing dates for us so we can really grasp what we'd be looking at for November 23?
I think it may be on, I'll look, but I think it may be on the
Oh, it's
sheet
on there.
Laura has. Is it on there?
I don't know them offhand, but I like the exact dates.
I don't need
And
exact dates, just approximate.
It's like a regular, for example, a regular levy. So we have a renewal, we could potentially have a renewal on the ballot in November. So that is traditional, like those regular ballots are 90 days beforehand, and that's beginning of August. You have to have them filed, and you need 2 resolutions in order to do so. We typically do those in June. The first one in the first meeting in June, then it needs to go to the county to get certified, and then the second one at the end of June to accept the certification, and then we file it with the county to meet the beginning of August filing date. That beginning of August filing date is still in place, but with a bond issue, you need either 110 or 120 days prior to pass those or you need to file. You need to file it 120 days before the election date, so that pushes up that beginning of August date even sooner to, I think, the end of June. So you're looking at that first resolution in sometime in May, and you need to send it to the tax commissioner to Columbus because it needs special consideration if it's going to put you over your debt leeway. In our case, it most likely will because we have the debt outstanding from the middle school. So you need that time frame to get the approval from the tax commissioner, and then it gets sent back, and then there's that second resolution to approve to put it on with the board, to file with the Board of Elections.
Okay. I just wanted to hear that out loud for everyone that's listening. For me, this is an urgent matter. I have kids in the elementary buildings. They've been there for 6 years. You know, the situation is as the committee described it. All you have to do is see it once to really see what we're talking about. And as much as I want to do this fast, I just don't think if we can have a plan by May. I just don't think that does any service to us as leaders or our community who we're trying to serve. So I am supportive, despite my reservations, about May 2024. And I do think, like, I'm really excited to hear what's in store with Steve and Cameron in terms of how we manage the next 4 years, because we can't hold the way we are right now. So, yes.
The other thing that I would add to that timeline as well, besides the process to go on the ballot, is also we need to make a decision with Muraski in the sense of when the addition was built for Muraski, there was no bond dollars used for it. It was PI funds, and the way that the loan was drawn up at that time, in the early 2000s, it was a land lease. So technically, as long as it's paid off, there's terms on that building that it maintains a stature. So we would have to make a decision either to adjust those terms with the holder of the land lease or pay the remaining debt off, which is set to be paid off by 2024. So we would need to do something with that land as well. So there'll be a process for that. Yep.
Any other discussion on this topic? Well, thank you for the conversation and the direction, and we will start meeting and discussing specific timelines and plans to work towards that and the engagement process, and then obviously we'll not only engage with our committee members and our key communicators in that group, but our community as a whole as to the progress and the work that we're doing. And throughout, there'll be plenty of opportunities for feedback. So the engagement process, even though it's housed with committee work, the engagement process that we've mapped out is going to be iterations of sharing with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, getting their feedback, making modifications to those plans and ideas. So over the coming months, we will have plenty of opportunity for input and feedback. Any questions for me before I move on to operations? All right, so with that, I'll ask Steve to come back up for one item that he has on the agenda for tonight.
Good evening again. Just need to pull up the agenda. I apologize.
It's up on screen, Steve.
All right. Oh, very good. The item up for your attention tonight is the addition of security cameras. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the purchase of additional cameras for all elementary buildings and the Strongsville Early Learning Preschool, including hardware and software for those buildings and the district from Southeast Security. The total cost not to exceed $248,221.19.
All right, this does require a vote, so do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Kilbane, second by Ms. Stavcek. Steve, do you want to explain?
So we are woefully under-surveilled at the elementary schools, and there is no camera system at the preschool at this time, or early learning preschool. So I would say that's the same for them. This will allow us to bring those camera totals up to a level that we can properly surveil some of the things that are going on there. The average amount of cameras right now in the buildings is 8 in those buildings. Compare that to our high school and middle school. The high school has 300 cameras and the middle school has 250. So this will help bring that up. Also, this proposal would help us move not just to where we see the pictures, it will also include analytics licenses with some of the cameras, so that if somebody enters the property or if there's a situation where we need to do some searching based on facial recognition, clothing color, gender, location, we could more quickly and efficiently go through our camera system to find those images. As a former assistant principal at the high school, I can tell you there were hours spent trying to find the situation and then try and find, okay, where did the student exactly go from that situation? So which camera am I going to try and find going around the building? This would greatly help that. Also, it utilizes our existing infrastructure as far as the servers and all of that, but it does put us on a better path, in my opinion, with increased surveillance, using some what is now industry standard surveillance techniques and surveillance software, where our current software is not capable of such things.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about the funding for this?
So the funding for the elementary schools is coming from the OFC School Safety Grant. So that's a unified monetary amount for the whole project. But as we go through the project, the cameras, all of the infrastructure that's needed, cabling, things like that, as it goes into those elementary buildings, that will come off the total from what we were awarded from the OFCC. That total in its entirety is $289,000, but it was per building. So some of the buildings got $43,000, other buildings got $50,000. I hope that's not too confusing yet, because I'm going to get confusing probably in a second. However, since we're doing a total renovation or a replacement of the software system itself, there is some of those components that are going to have to go into the middle school and high school. Those, and also here, those buildings are not covered by the grant, so we're going to have to extrapolate all this out. Basically what it comes down to is my office is going to have to make sure that we're micromanaging what's put into what building so we know which fund to bring it out of. If it's in a building that has not received money, that will come out of the permanent improvement fund. If it was from a building that received the safety grant money, it will come out of the safety grant money until that money is dried up.
One more question, Steve. So we just talked about, hey, we need to replace these elementary school buildings, and here we're putting a significant amount of funds to support the camera system. At the time when those buildings are no longer in existence here, what happens to all of the cameras and things that we put in them?
The servers and the infrastructure of that nature are all housed at the high school and middle school. But all the cameras themselves, now, that's all harvestable. So that would be something that we could put in. Keep in mind, these cameras that we install with your approval this summer, those cameras would now be 4 years old in a new building. So again, we have cameras that are that old and they still work fine. I'm going to stand here and lie to you and say every camera is going to be harvestable, but every camera that's usable, every camera that is able to be used in a new building, we will harvest from the buildings before they are destroyed and used in whatever new buildings are built. And at that point, it comes just down to the wiring. Is it worth going through and pulling back all the wiring versus building new wiring? Again, I don't know, because the cost of wire has greatly increased over the past 2 years. So if that trend continues, I may say yes, it's worth having our guys go through and pull back all those wires. Or it may just be leave the wires in place, but we got the cameras and we have the infrastructure and we move forward with our new buildings. The licensing with the analytics is not camera specific. It's a license that it's called a back end addition to the camera. We can buy, as we move forward, cameras with analytics that store them. However, in all the presentations that I had from the different vendors, in my opinion, the backdoor analytics is more useful, since I can move those licenses around as needed. And also, the analytics on the front end, I call it affectionately, it's more like a casino camera. I don't need to see somebody doing that thing in that moment right there. I just need to make sure that somebody's aware of what happened and then within 7 days review. Or if it's more immediate, I can use the analytics to find the person on campus.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve, when is the installation timeline?
The installation timeline, everything, all of the equipment coming in is this summer.
So the concern I have, and you brought this forward earlier, and I asked that it be delayed so I could think it through. On the one hand, the analytics is NCIS, TV, et cetera. On the other hand, it's a burden. Not done correctly, not done safely, it can become a tool that can harm. We're talking about license plate scanners. We're talking about facial recognition. Because I geek out on this stuff. There's a story, or not a story, there's an article, Manhattan Entertainment District, Madison Square Garden, put in facial recognition cameras. A lawyer working for a law firm went to Madison Square Garden, was identified by the facial recognition cameras, and was asked to leave the building because she worked for a law firm that had a case against Madison Square Garden. And She was there for Girl Scouts. So we don't have any policy on that kind of stuff, but we're going to have to do all of that if we approve this. We're going to have a policy committee. Right now, I don't think we have very good guidelines on what administrators are allowed to access these systems, when they're allowed to access them, how we track it. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of good things. The idea of if someone comes in a car and we identify that they're a bad actor through a license plate scan and we can react to it, that certainly is a scenario that helps keep us safe. On the other hand, the Madison Square Garden thing, we could suddenly be policing things that we shouldn't be doing. We also have the issue that all of this facial recognition becomes biometric data that we're going to have on all of our students and all of our employees, and we have FERPA requirements for that we have to keep that private and safe. And so I think there's a lot to grapple with that is in the larger world, but unfortunately, we now have to deal with it now. So I do want to, I am supportive of the purchase. I think we do need to do it for security's sake, but we have a burden now that we're going to have to get ready and put in place by the summer, especially for next school year. So I appreciate the delay to let me just kind of think through that stuff. But it does mean we have a burden, and I'm not on the policy committee anymore, so somebody else has a burden. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? All right, hearing none. George?
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausel?
Yes, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We do have one more discussion item under my report for this month, and I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to share some of her thoughts on our non-certificated substitute rates.
Thank you. So if you recall, I think back in the beginning of this school year in August, we talked about increasing our teacher substitute rates, which we did. And what we did was we based that rate off of the teacher base so that you can kind of keep up and it would be increased when the teacher base increases. But we really haven't done anything with our non-certificated staff in terms of what their substitute rates are. And anecdotally, over the last few months, we're really struggling to fill a lot of these positions. So what I have for you tonight is just taking a look at some of the reasons and history first as to how we establish our substitute rates for our non-certified staff. So typically, just for everyone's knowledge, our non-certificated personnel are paid a little differently than our teachers. They're still on a step schedule. It goes A through K, and every year they move on that schedule. So substitute rates for our non-certified have been based off of the step A, that rate, and have been a percentage. So unlike our substitute teachers, this was always on the base, and so they did move with the incremental increases that were afforded to our non-classified staff. However, most of them are at either a 60% of step A, and bus drivers were placed at 75% of step A. However, as you know, a couple months ago, we had to look at our cafeteria hourly rate because it was falling below minimum wage, and so we had to do those adjustments periodically for certain rates. Because as the minimum wage increases, we can't pay below that. So we've had to make some adjustments. So as we've gone through the years, the 60% and 75% are a little tweaked because of that rationale. So that was 10 years ago that we started this process and had 60% and 75%. And so, as at this point, I do think it's time to relook at these and see what adjustments the board would be willing to approve. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding of what I've done is kind of just taken a current state of our substitutes right now. So one of the things that, and my recommendations are based on many of these variables. So when we look at the market right now and the impact of the current market, When you look, I always hear, if I could go to a restaurant and make more, I could go to a store and make more than I would as a monitor or cafeteria in your district. And so we did that research and kind of went on sites and looked at how much an hourly employee would make at certain stores. And we, for many of our non-classified substitute rates, those are well below that. The availability of candidates. So a lot of people are saying, well, because of COVID, people aren't coming back to work. Or because of whatever reason, they don't want to work. And really, I was just on a webinar dealing with human capital, and really what it's saying is even before COVID took place, the number of people available compared to the number of jobs available, there were just less people to fill positions. And so that is continuing, and that is a trend that we're seeing. And so when we say that where are the people, well, there are just less people to pull from. The other thing too, as we look at comparables, whether we're comparing in the market or we're comparing with our neighboring districts, we have to kind of look at, is it worth somebody coming to be a monitor for us for $10 something? Is that worth the price of gas that it's going to take them to come here and be here for a few hours if they're not living right in Strongsville, or even if they are living in Strongsville, depending on where they live? Is it worth them coming here? The comparables, I did the comparables around many surrounding districts. I've been in touch with a lot of my colleagues in human resources in different districts, and we're all fighting the same battle. And we're all saying, well, what is your rate for this person, and what is your rate for this position? And we're all looking to increase our rates and trying to. It used to be we would all work together really well, and we still do, but now it's feeling like every man for himself. We need to get these people so that we have substitutes to fill each and every day. A couple other things is this. Our current employee numbers of substitutes, what it looks like that we have in numbers of substitutes. It looks like we have 42 substitutes to fill these positions, but then when it comes down to it, there may be only 11 that actually work for us on a daily basis. So whether they're subbing in other districts or whether they, are picking and choosing of what they want to fill, it really is a very low number of substitutes that we currently have on the books that are currently, we have a higher number of substitutes on the books, but those that are working is very low. Fill rates, since I brought up the teachers, because I think we've increased our rates, we have permanent subs, our fill rates for teachers are pretty good. We hover around, I would say 85% usually for just our certificated staff. It's not perfect. We still have vacancies day by day, but it's much, much better. And in terms of fill rates for our non-certified staff, they probably hover between 40%, some are 35% on any given day. So that's pretty low. And the other piece that I just want to mention is that because of the substitute flexibility law that went into place where people without bachelor's degrees can come and sub for us in a teaching position, there are also lack of number that would want to sub in a non-certified position. So again, just looking at all of those variables together is how I've formed my recommendations to you. And so what I've done is thinking of increasing the percentage of the base. I just believe that we need a market adjustment based on where we are right now, currently. I want to be competitive with our comparables, whether it's outside in stores or businesses, and also with my comparable districts. I want to bring some relief to our current employees. What this involves when we don't have subs, for example, if we don't have a special education aide in a classroom, then our teachers are having to compensate for that. They are not getting their playing time. They are not getting their breaks. We have many custodians that work double shifts because of a lack of subs, and then monitors, our administrators or other people are going in to help in our cafeterias and our playgrounds. So, and I know Donna today just told me that she was in a cafeteria, she was down 2 people, and her secretary was also in a cafeteria helping. So, I do want to thank all of our current staff that has just stepped up in an enormous way to keep our district going each and every day for our kids. I would like to get more of the substitutes that are on our books to actually come and work for us, and maybe if we increase that rate, we have a better chance. And then I want them to stay working for us, for sure, keep them in our district. So what I have here are my recommendations based on everything that I shared, and I'll just go a little bit more in detail as to each one because they are a little different. So I'll provide a little rationale for you for each one. What I tried to do, though, is stay between that 5 and 15% additional for each category. So again, you'll see either it's up 5%, 10%, 15%, depending on the classification. So when we look at a monitor, current rate, I'll just kind of take you through this chart, is $10.23. So as I mentioned, is it worth the price of gas to just come and sub for us for 2 hours and get paid that rate? So currently, that's 60% of step A, as I shared. I'm proposing that the new rate go to $12.79. That would be 75% of the base. And then as we did for our teacher subs, we implemented, if you stay in sub with us for up to 30 days at least, they don't necessarily have to be consecutive, but you would get a bump up. And so that would be the same case here, that they would go to then 80%. So a couple things as we looked at surrounding businesses around Strongsville and we looked at what they pay. There is an advantage to wanting to sub as a monitor. This might be a little lower and comparable to that, but there is, people like to come in and work for 2 hours and then leave. They're not, committed to a day-to-day job of 6 to 7 hours. And so I do think this would be a much better rate for our monitors and allow us to get more people. The other thing that I looked at is we have 42 monitor subs on the books, and we have 17 that are working for us. So that's still pretty good. But that number is a little bit higher for monitors. As we move to special education, and I'll kind of talk about these two, we have MM, which is for our students in a mild moderate category. So these students are students that have learning disabilities, but might be in the general ed setting for many of their classes and may need assistance just transitioning to class or to different activities that are in the classroom. I also have special education aides. This is our moderate to intensive. So these are students that require a little more assistance. There could be a toileting involved. There could be special feeding involved, and a lot of different behaviors that are involved with these students and can be challenging. And so in the past, this, as you can see at the current rate, $13.24 was the same for both of them, and that was 75% of the base. And so I'm proposing that for MM, which is a little lighter duty, you're dealing with would be $14.12, 80%. But for MI, and I will say this is probably our highest need right now, is to get people to come and help us be substitutes in a smaller classroom with students with challenging needs. So this is why I'm recommending that this one be higher. And then again, you can see after 30 days where they go. In terms of subs that we have working for us, we have 34 on the books, but only 11 that actually work, and most of them prefer to work in the MM classrooms. So, along with this, obviously, we do provide training. We do offer shadowing opportunities where people can come in and see what's going on. But I will say, one day in that room, it may seem a little like, oh my goodness, there's so much going on. But their teachers are really helpful in trying to get them trained and help, and we'll provide even more shadowing days if that's needed. But again, this is one of our areas that we're really struggling. And then our current employees, working with these students, there's, because it's a smaller classroom, sometimes there's more illness, and so, they're exposed to a lot of different things. And so there is a high rate of absences there as well. Cafeteria, you can see that's the one you just approved a few months ago to compete with minimum wage at $10.10. That's 64% of the base. I'm recommending $12.55, as I just mentioned. We have Donna and her secretary subbing a lot in these cafeterias, or they're just, we have some current employees that will come in a little early and help out if people aren't there. But we only have, I believe, 3 substitutes on the books for cafeteria. So again, fast-paced environment, lot to kind of learn and go through as we prepare food out each and every day for our students. But for that one, I'm recommending a little higher percentage just because of the lack of subs and, again, competing with other places other food places, other restaurants. That's pretty close to what they're offering. For media assistant, I did do this one just so we could have it there as well. However, most of our substitutes for media assistants come from within the building. We'll have people that move up into this role. Every once in a while, though, we do have a longer-term substitute that comes in, or our current media specialist, Ellen, at the elementary will go cover. So I don't think this is that much of a need, but I do think just to be comparable with the market, we do need to make an adjustment. And then the last group here is our custodial. Go ahead.
Can you go back to the earlier slide?
That one?
The comparison.
Okay.
Cafeteria hourly, how is that job different than media assistant or monitor?
The cafeteria hourly are usually a couple hours. They're the ones that maybe are not necessarily preparing the food. So our current, if there are absences, let's say in our cooks, those cafeteria hourly, our current employees may go up to that so that they can get more money. So cafeteria hourly are working maybe 2 to 3 hours, and they're primarily doing the register as kids are going through the line.
Or serving.
Or serving, yeah, as they're going through.
So, because I'm just looking
Yeah.
at media assistant, I'm looking at monitor, and I'm trying to see how, I mean, and maybe that's not what we're trying to address, but the framework that a moderate aid is 80% and a moderate intensive is 85%, that has a rationale to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to understand, you know, and again, I'm looking at it as a layperson,
Yeah.
cafeteria hourly versus working in the library with students versus monitor on the playground. What's the difference that they should get a 5%
Yeah,
different?
Part of what you have to look at too, when you consider this, the percentages are reflective of what the step A or base
Yeah.
wage is. And so those base wages are all at different levels depending on the job. So when you take a look, an 80% is not equitable, obviously, and 80% is not equitable to each of those positions. So depending on where that wage schedule is, you know, when we take a look at going to the analogy Jenny used, people can go to McDonald's and get more than 10-10 or whatever it was, or you know, any fast food restaurant. So we have to say, is 80% equitable to 80% of special ed? But it's a different measurement. It's a different base factor that we're using. So there is a part of it to look at fill rates and to look at where do we get it in the acceptable level. And since that base wage is different, the percentages need to change.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So just looking here at custodian maintenance and then our transportation department, same kind of rationale. I will say for custodians, we have 2 subs right now to substitute in our custodial ranks, and not many that, I know Steve left, but not many that we even get to apply for these positions. And so we are fortunate with custodians that, you know, especially, you know, we have at least one in the building, so if one isn't there, we have one that can do the minimum, but they're not getting to everything if they don't have a sub. Or we have some that are offering to work an extra shift and stuff, but again, that is taxing on our current staff. So I feel bumping it up into the market range, if I would go work at Home Depot or Costco, is more in line with that. Maintenance, we don't sub this very often, but again, kind of moving it up into the more marketable range. It happens more if we need a long-term sub in place, if somebody's out, because we have, you know, many of them, and so they can cover for that day or two. So we don't often sub there, but I did want to include them as well. Transportation, that is a whole different ballgame. If you remember, you approved 3 floaters for them. We're at the point now where those 3 floaters are actually doing what we set out to do. They are covering for FMLA leaves right now, but they're still, you know, covering every single day, more than, you know, we anticipated, but they are doing that. But driving subs, we have 2 currently. And so, you know, that is why you see this as moving up here to 80 and then 85%. Again, we're trying to recruit. I just hired one driver, and he was very complimentary of our transportation department and said, I'm going to go tell all my friends to come here as well. So, that's really what we have to do to try to recruit people to come. But with this one, the reason why I have an asterisk there is we do have some recent retirees that have just retired and are willing to come back. But, again, their feedback is, I'm not going to come back for $16.85. And I'm not, I would rather have it be closer. So one of the proposals, I didn't write it on this chart, but is if you are a retiree, could you come back at 90%? Just because you are loyal to our district and coming back. And so talking it over with Mike Harkar, our union president in transportation, the other issue that we have to consider for this one is the sit time rate. Because right now, if you're a sub, you just make that sub rate. So you're making $16.85 whether you're sitting or driving. But for our drivers, they have their hourly rate, and then if they're sitting, it's a little different. So that's $17.09. So as you can see, if we bump up this new rate for drivers to $17.96, our subs would be making more than our current employees. So I would propose that sit time rate would be the same for subs as drivers too, so that it's equitable for them. But again, we have 2 subs right now, and trying to get more in training to cover, but still very much a need for our district to attract bus drivers. And then again, bus aides feel that they also need an increase there. We get very little subs for our aides. I think we have 1 or 2 on the books right now. So going from here, I would just look for your feedback and any thoughts or any other recommendations you have. But I do think it's a shot at attracting more subs for our district and, again, helping to alleviate the hardworking employees we currently have to cover these positions each and every day.
So what would happen next? We'll turn it over to Laura. We'll have some discussion, get some thoughts. Based on your feedback, then at a future board meeting, just like we did with the teachers, Jenny would come back in her section and actually put this, the percentages kind of as she's laid out and some of the ideas under the asterisks out there for a vote. But before she does that, we're looking for some questions, feedback, guidance from the board. So Ms. Hausum, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Iva. Who wants to start?
I think we have to pay them more. Bottom line, we need the people. And you have to stay competitive, so we really don't have a choice.
Right.
So I'm for it.
We need to attract and retain, so this is how to do it.
I have a question. I'd have to look specifically to see all the areas where this is the case, but monitor and cafeteria still jump out at me as the 2. Even with the increase, the new rate, we're still falling below like 50% of the other districts. So I guess I'm wondering, is this increase going to be enough to achieve what we're trying to achieve in attracting, and if we're still several dollars off in some cases, some of the other local districts, is it
that much below?
Well, some of them. So like Monitor 1279 is what be our new rate. Fairview's 1347, Lakewood 1655, Rocky River 1647, North Ridgeville's 1461. Like, we're still in the bottom half. Now, mind you, I'm not sure monitors are driving, so are we counting on only the immediately surrounding communities? Is that, what we're banking on? I don't know, but that raises some concerns for me is, are we doing enough? And a lot of them, the bumps put us in the upper half, and some of the bumps didn't. So that is a little strange to me, too.
Yeah, I'll address that, Michelle. Some of those, I put the, as you're looking at that, the aid, the educational aid and monitor all in one. And because what they call aid sometimes is different district to district. What they use as a monitor could be also an aid. So those numbers aren't completely apples to apples, I guess, I would say. So, just looking at that, I looked at just our monitor. We have different categories and classifications. So.
Okay. Thank you, that helps.
Yeah.
The problem we're trying to fix is fill rate, correct?
Correct.
Did you get fill rates from the other districts?
I can get more, but as we've talked just anecdotally, I know I had one district reach out to me and say that their fill rates were in the 20%. And so I had to share, and that was for teachers.
What are they doing?
Same thing. I mean, similar things, looking at their rates to try to bump up the rates.
No, I meant, what are they, if you have, so I want to make sure I understand fill rate right.
Yeah.
You have 10 vacancies for that day,
Mm-hmm.
and you're only going to fill 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing about the other 8?
That's the key. I mean, right now, if we don't have somebody to fill in, then we have to take from other areas, or like I said, we have administrators that are covering, teachers that are helping out.
I think you can look at transportation as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
Our 2 supervisors and our secretary in transportation are driving almost on a daily basis to make it work. People are doing double runs. And sometimes you just do without, right? For some of our special education classrooms, you just have one less aide, and it's not ideal or desirable, but as Jenny gave the example, the teachers are stepping in to do some of these things. So it is, you just got to make it work and make it flow. And I think you made a great point, Jenny, of the fact that this is also becoming taxing on our current employees, right? Because if you look at these positions, our non-certificated staff, if they work over their hours and they've worked more than 40 hours a week, they're either going to get straight time or they're going to get overtime and time and a half. We're getting to a point where people are saying, I'm good. Like, I just want to have some time with my family. I don't want to work the 50-hour, 60-hour weeks. And so this hopefully will help increase those fill rates. And like Jenny said, we have the people that said they want to sub for us. They're just not coming and showing up for the assignments. The other part that we want to make sure we do is, with the way our subsystem works, people get to go on, see the opening, select the opening. Sometimes we have to maneuver people to fill crucial positions. Our substitute pool is not really fond of that, right? I signed up for that job, I want that job. So if we increase our fill rate, we don't have to move people around. It creates happier subs, which makes them continue to work for us.
The reason I was asking about the fill rate is my concern is that we can adjust the salary if the salary isn't the issue. Although anecdotally it seems like it's the issue, I'm curious whether the other districts who have more have a higher per hour, if their fill rates are just as bad or worse, we're going to do this, and it's not going to actually fix the problem we're trying to address. In which case, before we jump on this, I'd like to be a little more sure. Long term, I think we need to start thinking about other ways to address absences. We did it with basically hiring staff to act as fill-in, and
Permanent subs.
permanent subs. Thank you. I was brain hiccuping, and I think those are the kinds of things. I think this is whack-a-mole, and if it would work, great. But I don't have a whole lot of faith that this is going to move the needle. And then George, if you can get us some numbers on what total cost would be.
Jenny, this may not be a perfect comparison, but we did raise the rates with teachers.
Yeah.
Did our fill rate go up?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel, I don't know if it went up. It's hard to compare, Michelle, because we had COVID going on and that kind of stuff. But I will say that we have, and I just looked today, 88%, fill rate for teachers, and we are doing PD. We are doing letters training almost every day and other things. Every day is filled with PD. So we're getting subs for those, especially at our elementary level. I will say at the secondary level, we still have period coverages for for a lot of our teachers, just because they're out a couple periods here and there sometimes. But we're still getting subs for secondary as well, outside subs. So I can't say for sure that the rate is the reason that we're in a better spot. But when I do talk to my colleagues, they are struggling to find people, and they keep asking, "What did you do? Why is your fill rate so high?" And our teacher rate is comparable to where they are, but they're even considering raising it just to find more. But I feel like in that case, because we did the permanent subs every day, which many districts did not, that has helped us to continue to work, and then, attracting more, and they get more money when they hit that 30-day mark, which helps. I think that's helped us keep some as well.
Thank you.
I see this as a multi-phase problem-solving pathway. So I think the question you pose, Rich, is the question we all have, right? Is increasing the rate going to address more people wanting to work with us? We'll see. If the board approves that, we'll see. I think part of it for me is, based on where the market is, what is an acceptable rate to say for an hourly employee sub rate, and are we at that level with the current metrics that we have? So I think there's some of those to say, like, hey, is $12.55 going to get more than $10.10? I don't know, but who's going to come work for 2 hours for $10.10? We're obviously not a whole lot of people based on the rate that we have. So I think that's a part where we can see, and then look at, like you said. So one thing that we're looking at is, for example, and I'm not going to give the specific department, but one of the things that we're looking at is how many employees are in this classification. On a daily basis, how many employees are absent, which means how many subs do we have to fill? If we don't feel we can get those subs, how many positions are we going to have that gives us the shot of filling those when they're absent? So for example, if we say right now we have 20 positions, 3 people on average are out a day, we only have 1 sub, maybe we need to look at bumping those positions down. Can we function with 18 positions? And then with the subs, we can adequately fill those. So those are things that we're taking a look at as well, where possible, right? Some you just can't do that, but others we've got some options.
And the other data point that I would want to make sure we're clear on is are there any other, similar to the bus driver sit time, are there any other unintended consequences that, oops, we now have a long-term employee who's looking at the sub rate going, what did I do wrong?
Sure. Yeah, and I wanted to do this first with all of you and get your thoughts first before I proceeded. Like I said, I did briefly talk with our union president for 028 and Mike, and he was the one that kind of said, what about this and what about that? So I'll do the same. I briefly mentioned to Paul as well, but I'll talk with Paul as well just to make sure we're not missing anything. The other thing I just want to quickly bring up to your question, Rich, is, when we do hire permanent subs for certain positions, it does pull from our current sub pool, usually. Those that are working are saying, oh, well, I'll be that, and then we lose, so it takes a little bit of time to get there. And then looking at, do we want to, again, if we hire permanent subs for monitors, we would have to do it for special ed aides, we'd have to do it for custodians, we'd have to do it for the groups, so that's just something to think about.
Any other questions for Jenny or me? With that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Board of Education, other. Does anyone have any others?
Are we gonna go back to these poor people stayed the whole time? Are we?
I have another.
You have another?
Yeah, and April 1st at Mashaw's, someone has a fundraiser.
There's a fundraiser for lacrosse.
I just didn't know if we were.
And there's
going to
be a booze
that
barrel.
or what. I didn't know. Michelle wanted to wait, but
Right.
I wasn't sure where we were at. I just didn't want them to leave without a.
I think we need to have some more discussion after we've heard the facility and give everybody time to absorb what the facilities committee said.
Okay.
So I think either Dr. Riba or myself can let them know. Any other Board of Education other? No? All right, hearing none. executive session. We do have need for executive session to discuss.
To consider the employment and compensation of a public employee and to prepare for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of employment.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Cobain. Discussion? Hearing none. George, take the roll.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Ms. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
And Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
We will enter into executive session at 8:50. I see no reason for further business when we come out, so have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.